All right, so today we're going to talk about operant conditioning. I'm going to go a little fast on this one because we've got a lot to cover. Okay, so what is operant conditioning? Operant conditioning is basically the idea that organisms learn to associate their behaviors with consequences. And consequence can be a positive consequence or a negative consequence, right? A reward or a punishment. Now, this guy, Edward Thorndike, he studied cats in these contraptions he made called puzzle boxes, where there were basically 3 different ways a cat could learn to escape the puzzle box. What he found was that cats learned how to get out via trial and error. So they did it again and again. They would try different things, and they learned slowly how to get out. And over time, the way that they were learning how to get out, those like mechanisms, those methods, they started remembering them quicker, and so they could get out faster. So Thorndike basically said that this demonstrates the law of effect, which means rewarded behavior tends to happen again. In the cat puzzle box situation, reward is getting out. So by getting out, those cats are more likely to demonstrate that behavior again. Punished behavior is less likely to happen again. Okay? So Thorndike concluded that learning only occurs when certain behaviors are strengthened. So the cat maybe had to press the lever rather than, scratch at the wall. So at the expense of other behaviors. Now this guy, B.F. Skinner, he is huge in operant conditioning and in psychology. And he drew upon this and he studied how to control the behavior of different animals, which we'll talk about in just a second. So Skinner was infamous for this box he created called the Skinner box, which the correct term is actually called the operant chamber. So basically, what he did is he had these rats on an electric grid. There was a way you could shock the rats. There was also a way for the rats to stop the shocks by pressing this lever. Also, the lever could help give them food. So there was a bunch of different things that this could do. And what Skinner used this for was to record how animals act out this concept of reinforcement. So any event that strengthens the behavior, it follows. So let's say this little rat presses this lever and it gets a piece of food. That is an example of positive reinforcement. You are giving something to the animal that it wants. Okay? Reinforcement works on humans too, right? If you work to get a paycheck. That is positive reinforcement. You do well on a test to get praise. That's positive reinforcement. Or you may act a certain way to get attention. Or maybe you do well on a test to not get bad attention, right? Takes away bad attention on you, which would be negative reinforcement. So, if you've ever trained a dog, which now I can say I have done, you use a process called shaping when you're doing this. So shaping is when you basically reinforce an organism's behavior in small steps to eventually get them to do what you want them to do, the ultimate behavior. So let's say you really want a kid to get a 90 on a test. If a parent wanted to use shaping to do this, each time they got progressively closer to that score, they would get rewarded. So let's say on the first test, they get an 80. They're going to get a reward. Let's say on the next test, they get an 80. They're not going to get a reward. But on the third test, they get an 85. They are going to get a reward because they're getting closer to that goal behavior, that desired behavior. With my dog, I had to train my dog how to do the trick of going on her back, the bang bang trick, by first teaching her how to sit. So I first had to teach her how to sit and reward her for that behavior. Then I had to shape her behavior to lay down, train, reward that behavior. Then I had to train her how to roll over had to give her rewards for that behavior. So basically, shaping is where you take small parts and you combine them all together eventually to get to your desired goal. So what's interesting is that shaping can tell us what organisms are able to distinguish. So let's say you train a dog to, bark when they see a red light, and only a red light, and they only bark at a red light, then that tells us that they can tell the color red from other colors. So we call this a discriminative stimulus, meaning the red light in that situation would be the stimulus that causes a response, whereas other similar stimuli won't cause that response. So that would be a discriminative stimulus. Another example maybe could be, you only train your dog. So a lot of dog trainers use these things called clickers. So you use a clicker to help them know what to do, to pair that understanding. And if they don't respond to maybe you saying a word and they only respond to the clicker, then you can tell that they know what the clicker is meant to signal. Another example, for example, when I want my dog to stop doing something, you shouldn't use a bunch of different words, they tell you. You should use one word, either no. My dog, her word is quit. So I say quit. And so when I say quit, she knows to quit. Now, however, when I say, stop, she doesn't necessarily know what that means. So quit would be the discriminative stimulus, the one that she can tell she knows what that means. Now, operant conditioning is different than classical conditioning because operant conditioning results usually in some type of skeletal response. So some kind of muscular movement or action. So whereas classical conditioning results in a visceral response, some kind of response from within the body. Now, finally, we won't talk a ton about this, but chaining is a very kind of similar procedure to shaping. So chaining is this procedure in which you reinforce when you're reinforcing one behavior, it's allowing for the opportunity to engage in the next behavior. So in this example, this rat is trying to get to the top of this series of little puzzle kind of things, and they have to climb up the ladder. So to reach food on the top platform, the rat must climb a ladder, okay? It climbs a ladder, then it has to pull a string to raise the ladder so that it can climb up again. So each of those behaviors, like pulling a string, reinforces the act of climbing the ladder. So then they can do that once again. And we can talk more about this, but it's not a huge concept that will be tested on for us or on the AP test. There's only one question that mentioned it. Okay, so this is super important. So we're going to talk about reinforcers. So write this down in your notes, what I am saying. Reinforcers increase behavior. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative reinforcement. The overall goal is to increase behavior. Okay. So positive reinforcement is when you increase behavior by adding something that is a pleasurable stimulus. Okay. So, for example, we're in class, let's say you're doing something really good and I give you a candy and you like candy. That would be an example of positive reinforcement. I'm giving you something you want, right? So getting money for good grades would be one. Any kind of reward really would count as a positive reinforcer. Even just verbal praise counts as a positive reinforcer. I want you to think of at least 2 examples of a positive reinforcer. Now, here's where positive reinforcement can get kind of tricky. So let's say a kid throws a tantrum to go to McDonald's. And then mom takes the kid to McDonald's. That kid just learned, well, guess what? If I throw a tantrum, I get what I want. He's now been positively reinforced to throw tantrums to get what he wants. So positive reinforcement is all about getting something that you want. It's going to increase the behavior. Now, negative reinforcement is when you increase a behavior by taking away something you don't want. So let's say, for example, I get headaches. So what do you do to take away a headache? You take some Advil or ibuprofen or whatever. So when I take the Advil, it takes away my pain, right? So because it's taking away something I don't want, it's going to increase my behavior of taking Advil. This is how drugs can work too, addictive drugs. If a drug takes away bad feelings for you or a person, it's going to increase the chance that you're going to take the drug because it's increasing the behavior. So let's say we take the same kid tantrum McDonald's example. So the kid is throwing the tantrum and he is driving mom nuts. The mom takes the kid to McDonald's to make him be quiet, and it causes him to be quiet. The mom is now being negatively reinforced because it's taking away something annoying to take him to McDonald's again or given to him in some way because it's going to reduce that annoyance. So negative reinforcement is all about reducing something we don't want, reducing pain, reducing something annoying. And negative reinforcement is not punishment. So negative reinforcement, like I said, it takes away something you don't want. It doesn't take away something you do want. That would be punishment. Now, another example of this, if you have a newer car, what happens if you're not putting on your seatbelt in a new car and you start driving? You'll hear beep, 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 beep. And so what do? You put your seatbelt on because it takes away that annoying sound. So these car designers were smart because they learned that they can negatively reinforce you to put your seatbelt on because it will take away that annoying sound. So you're more likely then to put your seatbelt on in the future so you don't have to hear that annoying sound. That would be a negative reinforcement. Okay. So reinforcement, regardless of if it's positive or negative, increases behavior. All right, we're moving on. Okay, so there are a few different types of reinforcers. So primary reinforcers are unlearned. These are things that are innately reinforcing. So these are ones that often satisfy a biological need. So food, pain removal, sexual reproduction stuff, these are primary reinforcers. Conditioned reinforcers or secondary reinforcers work by basically having learned an association through classical conditioning first. So example is money. Money is a secondary reinforcer because money alone technically does not satisfy any biological need. It's random paper, right? But because of the purpose it serves, it can get you a primary reinforcer. So that's basically what conditioned reinforcers are or secondary reinforcers are. So I want you to think of what are some other examples you can think of for conditioned reinforcers. What are other things that can serve as a reward that don't serve necessarily a biological need, but can serve something else? Okay. Now, we're also going to talk about immediate and delayed reinforcers. So in rats, you have to give the reinforcer within a time period of less than 30 seconds. So the animal does the behavior, you give them the reward. Otherwise, the rat's not going to learn the task you want them to do. Humans, though, are different. We respond with delayed reinforcers. And I don't know if this video is going to play. If not, I'm going to skip it. But I want you to look this up. Look up the marshmallow experiment. I'll probably show it in class too. And we can talk about how delayed reinforcement works. So I want you to think of some examples where you have to wait a while to get a reward. And write that down in your notes. Be prepared to talk about that. Because sometimes it's better for us to get a delayed reward than an immediate reward. Because life is more like that, unfortunately. This video is going to play. I'm going to skip it. I'll link it. Okay. Now, there's another example of reinforcement that goes off this thing called the Premack Principle. So basically, have you ever been told, okay, you can go outside to play once you eat your veggies? If so, your parents were using the Premack Principle. It's basically reinforcing a behavior with something that you don't want to do. Infrequent behavior with something you do want to do. A more frequent behavior. So it's kind of like a first then kind of situation. First you can eat your veggies, then you can have a cupcake. First you have to do your homework, then you can go hang out with your friends. First you can clean up your room, then you can do this. It's reinforcing the behavior you want to increase with one they want to do. So instead of like a tangible reward, it's reinforcing with another behavior. Now, I want you to think of an example where this has been applied in your life, because I'm sure your parents have done some kind of thing like this at one point or another. Okay. So now we're going to talk about reinforcement schedules. So the way in which an animal is reinforced is very important, and it can change how that animal responds, really. So continuous reinforcement is when you reinforce the desired response every time it occurs. So let's say I'm teaching my dog how to shake. Every time she shakes, I give her a treat. And this is really good when you want to teach a skill very rapidly, and it's really good for mastering a behavior. The only issue with this, though, is that extinction also occurs rapidly. So if you stop giving the treat, they stop shaking, in the example like my dog. Then we have what we call partial or intermittent reinforcement schedules. So this is where responses are sometimes reinforced and sometimes not. And with this reinforcement schedule, the learning is going to take longer, but the resistance to extinction is greater. So let's say a pigeon has learned to peck a key to get food. So they're going to peck, peck, peck. If you gradually phase out the food delivery until it occurs rarely and it happens randomly when they are rewarded, they have found that the pigeon can peck up to 150,000 times without a reward. So you keep people doing things for a long period of time. These variable reinforcement schedules is how gambling works. The reason why people get so into gambling is because you never know when you're going to win. And so you'll do it again and again and again and again in the hope that you win. But because of that, that uncertainty, it actually drives behavior and continuous behavior for a long time. So we have some different examples. One is called a fixed ratio schedule. This is where you get reinforced after a fixed set of responses, okay? So fixed ratio, the ratio is talking about the number of responses. So Dutch Brothers uses a fixed ratio schedule. They give you a free cup of coffee your every 11th one you buy. So it's on a fixed schedule. Then you have variable ratio schedules. This is what I was talking about with gambling. This is where response rates are highest and the most consistent. Now remember, it takes longer to learn this initially, but once the skill or behavior is learned, it is very consistent. This is also what they do to us with phones. Constantly buzzing the phone makes us check our phone all day long because we never know when it's going to be buzzed. So we're addicted. Then you have fixed interval schedules. Think of kind of the mail with this. This is where the mail comes after a specific time has elapsed. So every day at this time, you go out and check the mail. That would be a fixed interval. And so we're talking about time, ratio, we're talking about number of responses. And then you have variable interval schedules where it reinforces a response at unpredictable time intervals. So again, kind of the phone can work for that one. It depends. Some people say they purposely used to do variable ratio schedules on us to get us to look at our phones, but mostly probably it's a variable interval schedule because your phone just buzzes at random times throughout the day, and so it causes you to check it a lot. So the one though that works the best to increase a lot of behavior for a long time is the variable ratio schedules. So from these reinforcement schedules, which is the fastest? I mean, fastest in the amount of time it takes to learn a behavior, and which is the most consistent. Okay, write that in your notes, and we'll talk about that. Now, I also want you to answer for me. In your life, what type of reinforcement schedule do you respond to most strongly? And think of some examples in your life where reinforcement schedules are used. Maybe you get an allowance. That would be one of these types of reinforcement. That'd be following one of these types of reinforcement schedules. Okay. And I'm going to end here actually, and I will do another video. You'll also watch this one tonight, but I'm going to pause this one here and we'll talk about punishment next time. Okay.